The Claw! OpenClaw is here! Alright folks, welcome to the channel. My name is Justin, and we're going to get right into it. I want to talk about OpenClaw and what it is, what the big hype is, how it might help, and where this may be going. So let's get into it. First off, if you're not familiar, big picture with OpenClaw, it was an open source software that was just, recently released, but just in about the last week or so, it gained a lot of traction, especially like on Twitter and things like that. So what is it? We're moving away from chat bots where you just kind of, open up your AI chat and ask it a question and wait for an answer. That's the old. Now the new is we are moving into what we call agents. What does that mean? That means you just tell it what you want, sit back and let it do the work. So this is significant. Why? Because it's open source. And what does that mean? So it means that it's not from like a closed source or a company. This is open source software. This is released to the public for anybody to use, to change, yada, yada, yada. And when they originally put it up, people were going crazy. They were going out and, trying to install it on their computers, trying to install, buying Mac Minis and things. Some people setting it up in a virtual private server or VPS. But here's the catch. There were a lot of security vulnerabilities, and so it just was it could have turned into a nightmare, meaning you could have had your whole hard drive wiped dry. You could have had your API keys taken, and that means you're spending money, somebody else is spending money, basically like a free reign check, a free credit card. And yada yada. There was just a lot. There was bugs in the just it wasn't very easy for most people to do. And so so for the last week, a lot of folks have been saying don't install it on your own computer, but if you want to install it, maybe put it on an old computer or a Mac Mini or something like that. Give it its own its own space. And if you want to do a VPS, then you got to maybe do even more manual work to kind of set that up to make it safe. But it still requires some know-how, some technical know-how, and so that's what it is. Now, why do I think it's important? Basically, they're saying it's kind of like the what Siri should have been all along. It kind of works. You've got the OpenClaw software. You connect it to a brain, like an LLM, any language model that you basically want. Some are going to be more expensive than others, unless you got like a really solid big computer, you can run maybe these models locally, and then you could have a free brain. But for most people, probably not. But maybe. And then the third component is easy access. You could hook it up to your iMessenger, you could hook it up to Telegram, you could hook it up to WhatsApp. So basically, easy user interface. You just tell it what you want, let it go do its thing. Not always perfect. A lot of people are saying, oh, wow, it works wonders, it does great things. Others are saying, I had to, try 10 times, or it's broken, or it did this, it did that, it didn't listen to me, yada, yada. All right, here's my take. My take is, I think this is a pivotal shift away from the chatbots that we've been working and dealing with, for the last couple of years, into this new agentic world. Being that it's open source and seeing how many stars like this thing had gotten so much attention, I think that this project is just going to have so many eyeballs on it and so many really smart developers. They're going to keep making it better, keep fixing some of these errors, fixing some of the security issues, making patches, etc. And that's already what we're seeing. We're only like a week into this whole hype cycle, and I'm already starting to see that happen. So my approach, and I can't tell people what to do. I'm not telling you to do this or don't do this. I'm just telling you what I'm doing. I'm just watching it. I am slowly kind of, looking here, looking there, maybe tinkering here or there. But I really think that if I just wait a few weeks, I think that a lot of updates, especially, the serious stuff, hopefully will kind of be either ironed out or a lot easier to use. So if you can't wait 2 weeks, or you don't want to wait, I mean, that's up to you. In the meantime, for myself, I'm already starting to think, okay, what's the strategy? How can you use things like this to better your life, to be more productive, to make money, yada, yada, to automate processes? And a lot of these tools, even most of the tools that we're familiar with, the chatbots and some of the coding tools, etc., you still have to know how to interact with the machine, interact with the tool. I mean, you definitely get different results if you give it one prompt versus giving it another prompt. So maybe trying to figure out, well, what should I give it right off the bat so that I'm, ready to go in the way that I want to go. And I'm seeing what some people are already doing. I'm not going to mention all specifics here on this video, but, just watching the community and what people are doing, it looks like there are some common best practices or things that people are doing, and they're saying that, they're getting better results. So that's that. I think cost is something to think about. So, for most people, the cost is probably going to be the API keys, right? Every time you have to call on the brain. So, if you want to run a local model, means you're basically downloading, an open source model on your computer, but you have to have the requirements to do so. So, you're going to have to probably, for a lot of these models, you're going to need, pretty big specs. There are older open source models with fewer requirements that might work, but you might not, it might not be worth it. It might not get the results that you want. But depending on what you might use a tool like an OpenClaw for, maybe that's the case. The most recent update that I've seen for open source models, if you want it to run them locally, and even if you want to just use their API, is a Chinese model by Moonshot AI. It's Kimi, K-I-M-I, Kimi K2.5. It seems like it's been, pretty much on par with Claude's Opus 4.5, but it is open source, and their API, from what people have been, and I've looked and asked some LLMs, it seems like it might be, upwards of 75% cheaper or more than some of the alternatives. All right, that's that. So, real quick, that's my plan. I'm just kind of waiting and see what's coming out. I'm seeing a lot of development. Just recently, they had an event called ClawCon. I guess that is not open source. That is closed invitation only or something like that. But ClawCon, I think these are going to be a lot more of these developers getting together and doing some of these things. There's things that are happening already online. There's a lot of sites that are propping up. So I expect that we're going to learn more. Now, in the grand scheme of things, I think over the course of the year, we're going to see more and more and more things like this, probably by some of the larger frontier labs, like the OpenAIs, maybe Groks, Anthropics, etc., Google, who knows. But the security issues would probably be real or have to be dealt with in a different manner, and there might be limitations on what folks might be able to do with those models. Just because I just don't know how a frontier lab is going to release something so crazy powerful, but also perhaps so reckless out into the public. But I do think that we're going to see more and more of features that are autonomous, and we already have that. I mean, there already are some out there, but nothing that I've maybe come across yet quite like OpenClaw, and I think maybe that's why the internet is all in a buzz. So anyways, that's it. If you want to learn along with me, go ahead, and you can even find me on Twitter, Fast Entrepreneur, or just leave a comment in the YouTube video. But until then, that's my approach, and we'll see where this goes. Maybe I'll make an update, as I'm going, or in a few weeks. But who knows? We'll see. All right, guys. Peace. Hope this helps.